And welcome to another episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded, a podcast about business immigration and global mobility. We are rapidly approaching summer, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host Finn. Finn, how's it going?
Good man. At some point, we got to change the name of this podcast to Immigration and Seasons Decoded. We just love talking about the seasons on these catch ups.
For real, yeah. I mean, weather's always a good icebreaker. Coming back from the weekends, and all that good stuff. We have a great episode ahead for everyone. Finn and I chatted with Corinne Mossman. She is the VP of Business Development and Client Services at John L. Scott Real Estate, and she is also the president at the Puget Sound Relocation Council. She has many years of experience in the global mobility space, so we can't wait for everyone to hear that conversation. But before we get there, Finn, as always, just want to provide a quick update, news updates to our listeners regarding U.S. immigration, anything else that has caught our eyes. So before we were chatting, you mentioned that Stuart Anderson from the National Foundation of American NFAP. He put out a new article this morning. We're recording this on May 22nd. What's a brief synopsis of that article that Stuart wrote?
Yeah, essentially new research from Stewart's think tank, like you mentioned, the National Foundation of American Policy or for American Policy, did an analysis of Department of Labor data and how quickly they're processing perm applications and the denial rates for those perm applications. And what they found was that denial rates have gone up a fair amount for perm applications in the past year. So in Q2 of 2022, this time last year, the denial rates for perms was 4.4%, and it's almost doubled in Q2 of 2023 of this year to 8.5%. So something we've been tracking for a while. Obviously, it was a big finding from our immigration trends report that the majority of employers who we surveyed see the Department of Labor as the primary agency barring them from hiring foreign talent, not USCIS, not Customs and Border Protection, not the State Department, but the Department of Labor. Processing times for perms and prevailing wage determinations continues to go up, just adding to the uncertainty for employers in this time where visa demand remains high, and it's just harder and harder for employers to secure a visa for their employees in a timely manner.
Awesome. Thank you for that recap. We'll put the link to the article in the show notes below. Additionally, just some quick updates from elsewhere. Finn, as you know, a couple weeks ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed an immigration bill, and NBC News put out an update. Agricultural workers are fearful and brace for changes under new immigration law. One of the big pieces of that legislation is that businesses with over 25 employees must use e-verify to determine whether employees are legally allowed to work in the U.S. NBC News writes that some growers and farm owners are concerned there will be fewer workers, but others are optimistic that there wouldn't be major changes. So something we'll keep an eye on. Just see how that bill plays out, and once it becomes official, I believe takes effect in early July. And then a couple of other updates. There was an article from the New York Times. The 2022 CHIPS Act is in full motion, but a study from Deloitte indicates that there may be a shortage of workers, about 70,000 to 90,000 workers over the next few years. There aren't enough skilled workers, and not for these companies to hire. And could immigration play a role in that if things were to be changed? Potentially. We'll leave that up for listeners to decide. And then finally, Finn, I'm not sure if you if you caught it, but there was a really good in-depth piece from the Wall Street Journal titled "What Everyone Except the U.S. Has Learned About Immigration." And they really just kind of compare and contrast the U.S. with various countries worldwide, such as Germany, Japan, Spain, and how they're approaching their labor markets and immigration. It seems these other countries have recognized that, due to demographics and other factors, that they need to take action on immigration. But as Finn, as you know, immigration is not one of those. Or sorry, the U.S. is not one of those countries when it comes to taking action on immigration.
Yeah, unfortunately, like many problems of the last 15, 20 years, you need a functioning legislative body to actually make the changes necessary
Yeah,
to
yeah,
an immigration system. And that's something that we don't have.
exactly, exactly. Well, I mean, obviously, immigration news is always happening. But definitely a little bit on the quieter side in the last week or so. But any new updates we'll definitely be sure to share. So Finn, before we hop into the conversation with Corinne, another just quick programming note. Uh, we are recording this May 22nd, and a week from now is Memorial Day here in the US. So there will not be a new episode released the week of May 29th. We'll be back with a new episode on June 6th. And with that, our conversation with Corinne Mossman.
And now it's a pleasure to welcome Corinne Mossman to the podcast today. Corinne is the Vice President of Business Development and Client Services at John L. Scott Real Estate, a trustee on the board for the Foundation of Workforce Mobility, and the President of the Puget Sound Relocation Council. Corinne, you have quite the portfolio under your belt, and we're so glad you're here today to talk about your work and your background. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. All of that stuff sounds fancy. It just keeps me a little busy.
Well, Corinne, we always like to just start off by, we gave a short introduction to you, to our audience here, but we'd like to give you the chance and give you the floor to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the relocation and mobility space.
Sure, I would love to. So I think that if you asked anybody that's in mobility, they don't really have a linear path there. Everybody's kind of, gotten into it by chance or by accident. Um, So I actually went to school for finance and international business. After I changed my major, I was like on a whole different track before that. I was looking at pre-med and physical therapy and all these things, which didn't happen. So went to school for finance and international business, and one of my electives was for real estate. And if I completed it, they were going to give me a real estate license. So I'm like, great, I'm going to do that. That sounds nice to have. And so I did that, and I ended up working in real estate. And somebody asked me if I ever had an interest in working in relocation, and I had no idea what that was. I'm like, sure, sounds interesting, fun, I guess. So I started working in relocation and have not left. Just like many people, once you're in corporate relocation and mobility, you don't leave.
What would you say, I mean, thus far in your career, is one of your favorite aspects about your career or your current job, or one of your many jobs, I should say?
Many jobs. I would just say that I feel like my day is different every single day. So it keeps my mind busy, and there's always room for growth. I would say also, just by the nature of our industry, there's always changing legislation, for example, or technology that's influencing our industry. So even if you feel like you have a handle on everything, that there's chances are something's going to grow or expand, or there's something new to learn. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I also think that by the nature of what we do, everything is very geared towards service and making sure that people are getting to their destination in a safe and happy way, if we can do that. And so I think it's really rewarding to be able to help families through major transitions in their lives.
How does one in the mobility industry keep up to date with all of the goings on and all the happenings and all the changing trends and news? What are you consuming on a regular basis to keep up with your work?
Oh gosh, I would say I consume a lot of things. First of all, we have our industry professional associations. Those are a great way to stay connected. So we have Worldwide ERC, which is a membership association. And then we also have different professional associations within every vertical within the mobility space. So I would encourage everybody to get involved with the ones that are most applicable to them. And then, of course, we have regional groups like Puget Sound Relocation Council, where it is kind of a meeting of the minds for people that have an interest in a specific area. And so it's a great way. I would say I'm also, consume news probably a little more than I should, than probably is healthy, but I'm always trying to think about what's going to be happening, so I can be forward looking and applying it to how it may impact our industry or my everyday job.
All right. And when you're not doing all of that, what are you doing for fun in your free time? We always like to ask our guests what they get up to when they're not working or in their
I'm
career.
pretty open. I always like trying new things. So I am a natural explorer of things. So anything I can do that is something maybe I haven't done before. My husband and I like to do road trips. I love history. I love looking at the different. I don't know if they have these everywhere, but in our area, they have brown signs that are like an indication of a historical marker of some sort. I'm always like, pull over, got to read that. Um, I like going wine tasting, spending time with my family, reading, going to museums, just really give me all of the information.
I'm with you on the history front. I'm a frequenter of any historical society
Mhm.
where I live in the East Coast of the United States. So, Eric, I'll pass
Yeah,
it off to you. I know you have a couple of questions for Corinne.
yeah. Before we hop into that, I just know, yeah, Finn is a major history buff. I know we've talked many a times about Finn, what he's reading, and various maps he
Mhm.
has in his background. Um, Corinne, I think we're super excited to have you on the show because a lot of our conversation is going to focus on an aspect of relocation and global mobility that maybe is not always top of mind, but should be top of mind, and it's what you specialize in, which is relocation. Um, my first question for you, Corinne, is where in the mobility process is it important to think about relocation and living situations?
I would say that should probably be one of the first considerations that you start thinking about. Um, I know that immigration obviously is the big key factor there. And I have been working with a group actually in different verticals within our industry to kind of talk about this because a lot of the documents and things you're going through to prepare for immigration, you also kind of need if you're looking to buy a home, for example. And so we're kind of trying to think through a process or a way of getting in touch with transferring employees or assignees prior to them leaving their home country because sometimes depending on where they're coming from the documents that they may need to have they either need to collect in person and it could be difficult if they're trying to focus on that once they've already left trying to find a power of attorney to go get these things for them. So if there's any way that we can prepare them ahead of time, I think that would be great. I think also the financial literacy part of it is probably really critical because the U.S. system for financing and credit and all of that is typically really foreign for people that are coming from another location. And even though they may be in a really great position where they moved from, if they are not deemed credit worthy by U.S. standards, sometimes it's a little bit challenging for them to find a place to live. So there are a lot of great tools out there. I'm going to give a little shout out to my friends at First Tech. They do a really great job on expat finance and helping foreign nationals get prepared. So I think that not having that is kind of like an afterthought once people arrive somewhere to start doing that. I think it would really be helpful and beneficial to them to start thinking about it really upfront.
For sure, for sure. And yes, definitely shout out to the First Tech. We're actually going to be speaking with Brian
Oh,
in
great.
the near future. So we're very very much looking forward to that component. I think it's going to be a very good follow up to this episode. So, Corinne, what if foreign nationals want to purchase a home in the United States? Can you talk about how to help individuals and their families navigate the real estate market? Yeah, I think quick add on to that question. I recently bought a house, and for me, it was just a whirlwind. So I can only imagine what it's like for individuals and their families if they're coming from a different country.
Yes, definitely. You're right. It's a whirlwind for everybody. There are so many different pieces to think about, and I think probably the first thing would be to focus on the education part of it. I think that would probably fall into the duty of care category for corporations, for RMCs, for everybody. But I think it's especially important because it is such a big decision and such a big process. And so within the real estate part of global mobility, typically brokerages will have a trained relocation team of brokers to help transferring employees, and I think it's really critical to educate the transferring employees or assignees on why it's so important to work with somebody that's trained in relocation. Not only do they understand the timelines and all of the other competing factors that are happening, that you got to coordinate your household goods, or you have only a certain amount of time in temporary housing. They understand all of those challenges, but then they also understand the nuances of relocation programs and policy. And then, of course, when we look at folks that are relocating internationally, there's that added layer of understanding the whole system of real estate, how to get qualified, all of that. So I think it's really important to work with somebody that's trained, because there are real estate brokers out there that are slightly different model or something like that, might have different training, maybe not full time. It might be a side gig for them or something like that. So it's really important to work with somebody that's a full service trained, and goes through the ongoing training that our relocation certified brokers do.
Got it. Do you find that there is a particular breakdown amongst foreign nationals when it comes to those who, when they're coming over here, they want to buy real estate versus those who you mentioned temporary housing, those who just want to live in that apartment for as long as needed?
Well, I think everybody's needs are going to be different. And I think that probably one of the big drivers for families would be school district and making sure that they have enough space to accommodate their family. I think it's more prevalent for families to be relocating that are not, the traditional structure with like a mom and a dad and two kids. Sometimes they're bringing along another family member. Sometimes elder care is something to really think about. So I think that anything we can do to help them with that challenge, because it's something that they're going to be making a lot of their decisions based on. Your home is where your heart is. It's where you that's your safe space. That's where you're going to be. So I think it's anything we can do to help them prepare and land in a place that they feel comfortable is probably the best thing. I would say the preparation ahead of time is really important, because back to that international credit. For example, there are some countries where culturally credit is frowned upon. It's seen as living outside of your means if you have any kind of debt. And here, debt is kind of what forms your credit worthiness. So I think that if anything we can do in the education space on that would be fantastic. I know our destination service provider friends do a lot of that, but sometimes they don't get in contact with the transferring employee until the move has already been initiated and they may already be here.
In your career history and experience, what have you found works best when helping to educate foreign nationals on how we view credit, with your example, like what you just mentioned, like how we view credit versus how they might view credit back in their home countries?
Well, I think that again, having service partners that are trained on relocation, most of our relocation management companies do have preferred lenders, and they have preferred real estate brokers that are trained in relocation. So they understand that that challenge might be intrinsic just because of not having the familiarity, and they have to take that extra step of the education on the system and making sure that they know kind of the next steps, who all the players are, maybe help them out with some, definitions, act as a glossary sometimes. And we've worked really hard to kind of put some materials together and have our team really prepared to give that extra attention to that.
For sure, for sure. It's great. So I guess zooming out a little bit, and just want to ask you a couple questions on maybe like the financial literacy component of it, financial education. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of offering banking and financial services to those individuals and their families when they're coming over here to the States? And similarly, when should those discussions be occurring?
So again, I'm a big proponent of helping people understand this as soon as possible, perhaps before they're leaving their home country, so they can, you know, get familiar with it, prepare in the way that they need to. And I think that once you do have Brian on here, he'll be a great resource to kind of give some of those nuanced tips on how to be prepared, because they do a great job of not just lending for purchasing a home, but like the whole expat finance suite of products to make sure that somebody can land comfortably and buy a car or get a credit card or whatever it may be, because those are typically necessary for a lot of the big things here in the United States.
Got it. Final question for me, and then I'll turn it over. Oh, actually, I have two final questions before I turn it over to Finn. Um, zooming all the way back, zooming all the way out. How would you describe the current state of the relocation industry, and where do you see things headed in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
That's a big question. Um, I think that let's start with real estate. I know that there are a lot of changes happening right now in our industry. And we actually just covered this at our Puget Sound Relocation Council spring meeting, because there are some pretty big changes happening within the real estate segment of the industry that has greater impacts for whole industry as a whole. And I think we're coming to a place where it's more common to maybe collaborate with your competitors or work across verticals to come up with solutions that prop our industry up. And I really appreciate where that is going, because it's kind of like for the greater good, right? Kind of like the example. I think Volvo was the one that developed the technology for the cross shoulder seat belts, because it used to just be lap belts. And while they could have, capitalized on that because it was such a great innovation, they didn't do that. They shared it with the industry because it moved forward. So I would just encourage everybody, as you're working in your space, to think about moving the industry forward. And that way we have a little bit of say in how it moves forward, and it doesn't just develop without us having some skin in the game and, being able to influence that.
Got it. And one of those changes you just mentioned, I think it was earlier this week. There was an update in the state of Washington. Can you provide an update on real estate agency reform that just happened?
Sure, I would love to. So, I'll give you just a really high level overview, because there are some legal updates. So, I would encourage everybody who wants some more information to kind of check with their legal counsel, maybe look at some of the bills that are posted online through the bill tracker through the state. But essentially, there's a lot of changes going on right now. A few years ago in Washington state, our multiple listing service, who kind of hosts all of the listings for homes for sale, I think it accounts for about 80% of the listings in our state, made some changes to broker compensation to kind of promote transparency within the industry and give people a little more freedom of choice in how what services they want, how they want to compensate for them, and who they want to work with. And we've kind of been, navigating that and thinking through all the different ways that that impacts our industry. And kind of in parallel, our state legislature put forth some legislation, proposed legislation on real estate agency reform as a whole. And that actually passed the House and the Senate in April. And I believe the governor just signed it a couple days ago. So we are, all thinking together as to what that means for our industry, for our practices. And one of the interesting things is that, that's the real estate industry as a whole. And I know that most likely the folks that were involved in those conversations were not specialized in relocation. So we have to kind of respond to what those changes were, what are our best practices going forward. And so our group here in my area, that is a group of competitors, is collaborating and making sure that our mutual clients and our mutual stakeholders understand that these changes are coming, working together on education and kind of thinking through any unintended consequences or results of this that we really need to focus on to make sure that everybody else within our industry is prepared for that. And so I can send the information out if there's anybody that would like to read on it. It's a great lengthy read. You know how we have lined
Yeah.
through bills and all of that with amendments. But I would say that it is in Washington state right now. However, I would say that change is potentially imminent. There are some federal cases out there right now that are around broker compensation and real estate agency reform as well. So it's very possible that we may see that on a larger scale. And I know that just anecdotally talking to some contacts within the real estate relocation space in different states, that there are some that are kind of following suit with what Washington is doing.
Yeah, I think actually after this, we can you can share those links with us, and we can put them in the show notes so people can read and stay up to date. I guess final final question for me, and then I'll turn over to Fid. Earlier, you mentioned you're a big consumer of news. I am as
Mhm.
well. But when it comes to this type of news, real estate broker compensation, what resources do you usually go? What are your go-to resources?
That's a great question. I follow National Association of Realtors. I also follow, I try to pay attention to a lot of different news sources that pick up, the wire, because I want to see how everybody's presenting it as just a habit to make sure that I'm not, you know, biased based on one news source. So I would say the National Association of Realtors. Um, I actually have been following the bill trackers through the state legislature because they put out updates. And so I would just say find a professional organization that resonates with what you're looking for and try to sign up for their newsletters. We've also had some really cool updates happen kind of in the same legislation session around removing restrictive covenants and historic deeds, which I believe there used to be some racist language in deeds for homes and different documents. And so they are working on a project for that, as well as assisting some home ownership goals for folks that it may not have been accessible in the past. I think in our state, I'm not sure if it passed yet or if it's been signed. It did pass. About a piece of legislation that for every document that's recorded through the assessor's office, and $100 fee will be added onto that, and it will go into a fund to assist homeowners that were, you know, part of related to or part of a group that was historically excluded from purchasing homes. So I think it's really great that they're coming up with ways to support home ownership and kind of equalizing the opportunities.
I heard historic deeds. Corinne, if you ever want to marry your personal love of history and your professional work together, come out to New England, because there are some
Mhm.
crazy land deeds out here that people pull
Right,
out of the woodwork to claim, that they own, a John Dutton Yellowstone amount of land in the
right.
states here. And
I'm sure.
the laws are really, really screwy in New England when you have deeds from the 1600s that are signed by, King Charles II. um,
Wow, that is interesting. I'll have to connect with you on that.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I want to pivot a little bit to your work with the Puget Sound Relocation Council and maybe ask you to explain it to our audience from a bird's eye view. So first off, what is a relocation council?
Mhm.
What do they do? And then maybe tell us a little bit about exactly what the Puget Sound Relocation Council is doing.
Sure. So I can speak about Puget Sound Relocation Council because I've been a member for some time here, and I personally love the group. I think it's a great way to connect with other people in the industry. So basically, it is made up of HR or mobility professionals that perform that function within a corporation, and then a ton of different types of service providers that facilitate corporate relocation or mobility. So we have household goods movers, destination service providers, immigration providers, real estate, trying to think here, cultural and language trainers, school choice, just a ton of different partners that are really passionate about assisting families and transferring employees. And basically, we get together and we have a component of education where we plan out educational topics and share that with our members. We like to do a lot of interactive workshops as well. Typically, we offer continuing education credits for those that hold like a CRP or GMS designation, and we also try to have fun and usually allow a lot of time for networking and connecting. We also have a non-solicitation policy to kind of make it a safe space for those corporate members that like to join us. So, of course, if they're interested in the services, they can ask, but we kind of have some guardrails around how things can proceed and kind of like the rules of the road for when people get together. The other thing that's really important to us and most of the other regional groups out there are supporting charitable organizations in their communities. So we support an organization called iUrban Teen, which is a nonprofit that basically exposes underrepresented students to the STEM plus arts fields. So they do like workshops, they have all kinds of cool, curriculum, STEM tours with different companies, and try to ignite the spark of excitement in the students and expose them to different career paths. And so one of the things we've been working on with them is to help educate the students on what global mobility is. That way, when they've gotten all these wonderful skills through iUrban Teen, they know how to advocate for themselves when they're in the talent market, so that they can say, "Hey, I know what mobility is, and I'd love to, maybe negotiate that into my job offer." Um, and also so that they see that the possibility is there when they are actually looking for jobs, that if they may not have the means themselves, they can still consider an employment opportunity that might be outside the area, and understand what relocation assistance looks like.
That's awesome. Yeah, that immediately reminds me of Envoy had this infographic that was circulating around LinkedIn a few weeks ago of an iceberg, and it was showing immigration at the top of the iceberg above the surface, and then all other aspects of relocation and global mobility, that were below
Mhm.
the surface, and the 90% of the rest of the iceberg. And it sounds like at the council you guys are hitting on all that with your meetings and collaborations. I wanted to ask specifically because DEI has been a really important topic for the last several years, and I understand that you just started a DEI committee. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, Puget Sound Relocation Council started a DEI committee. Um, Gosh, I believe it was in 2019, maybe. It's been the last couple of years are really hard to gauge time wise. I don't know why. Uh, but so basically, what we do is we meet and we kind of figure out what we want to support as far as an organization, but we also share ideas with each other, and just have really honest, authentic conversations. And I really appreciate all of the things that we've been able to accomplish, and how we've been able to help other regionals or worldwide ERC or any of the other organizations that we're a member of, or even our own employers, kind of have those conversations. And so our board actually did some equity training too. We did a 4-part equity training series, which was really fantastic because it gave us the opportunity to get to know each other on another level, and then also take back what we learned to our companies and to our team. And so I would say that that space is always a little bit hard to navigate. People are not sure where to start or where they fit in, but I think that that's probably where growth happens. It's important to be okay with the discomfort, because that's when you start to grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing with the Puget Sound Relo Council. Corinne, as we look to wrap up the conversation, just want to ask you for your personal advice or words of wisdom for what are your words of wisdom for the mobility professionals, no matter where they are in their career stage, whether they're first entering the space or they're veterans, 5, 10, 15 years, etc. What have you learned over the years that helps you along your journey?
So I tend to try to find somebody that's really good at something that I'm interested in, to learn from them. I follow the thing, like the content that they produce or put out there. And I also try to understand what they're working on, so that I can see if there's any takeaways there that I can learn from. I would also say just get involved, because we have so many different organizations out there that are available to help connect people, to help people grow, and to help them learn. And so I would say that your movement forward is probably based on yourself. Like, get out there, get to know people, get involved, raise your hand. I know that we all have time commitments that we have to be mindful of, and I would say that all of these organizations have things that are really simple to get involved in. And, sometimes it could be as simple as being a greeter at an event, just so that you get to know people. And um, even just looking at name tags and understanding what type of member organizations there are, because sometimes you forget how broad our industry is and all of the different types of companies are out there that support talent mobility.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much for sharing. Anything coming up that Corinne, that you want to plug or highlight? Any events? Anything noteworthy?
Sure. So the Foundation for Workforce Mobility, I am a trustee member for that, and it is really, really amazing organization. So if you're familiar with Worldwide ERC, the foundation is kind of like the charitable arm of that. So Worldwide ERC would be like the head of the organization, and the foundation would be like the heart. So we're really passionate about raising funds and assisting charitable resource or charitable organizations and causes out there. So we allow for matching funds of scholarships for our regional groups. I believe they also supported some efforts in Ukraine last year. So we're also looking at supporting students that are interning with Upward Mobility, which is giving some paid internship opportunities to underrepresented students within the mobility industry as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And final question, Corinne, before we hop off. Where can listeners find you and interact with you?
That's a great question. Probably LinkedIn. I
LinkedIn.
always post on LinkedIn. I wouldn't say I'm a content creator, but I do post about where I am, things that are going on out there, upcoming events. You can also email me, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone. I would also say that one of the things that I like doing is connecting people. So if we do connect on LinkedIn and there's anybody in my network that you have an interest in connecting with, feel free to leverage that connection. I'd love to make an introduction and help you along your way.
Great. Well, Corinne, it's been a pleasure speaking with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining Immigration and Mobility Decoded. And looking forward to more collaborations.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. I
Great.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Immigration and Mobility Decoded. If you watched this video on YouTube and you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the Envoy Global YouTube channel for more content like this. Otherwise, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everyone.